Okay, so today I bring you a Commodore SX-64. This is the first portable color computer that was put out, and I must have at least half a dozen of these. I've got a couple of in the boxes and a few loose, and I don't know why I'm drawn to these so much, but I just love them. So what we're going to do though is this has the same issue that most of them do over time, and you'll see what I mean. There's a few things that go wrong with these that are pretty common considering their age. For one, they're portable, so pretty much the disk drive alignment on these goes out, you know, because they've been lugged around. They don't keep the cardboard protector intact, you know, to protect the alignment, and that's just what happens. So basically the alignment, you know, on the disk drive is one of the things that's pretty common. The other thing that's really common is the PLA chip on this blows. And the PLA chips on this, basically they're just, you know, they're just keen to go out over time. They erode with time, actually. So anyways, this is what's happened with this computer. So we're going to turn this thing on here and you'll see what I'm talking about. But what I'm going to go through is how to fix these things without having to take the whole thing apart if it's the PLA. The PLA chip in these things is actually pretty easy to get to. So let's turn this guy on. So the other thing that typically goes bad with these, and it's not that they go bad, is that on each side here, let's see if I can turn this. On each side here, there are these little plastic caps, and they're glued on. Actually, they're double face taped on. There's a screw underneath them to let you take off the handle, you know, for servicing. But what ends up happening is the double face tape, you know, gets dried out. Next thing you know, these things get lost. You can 3D print them, but of course, nothing is ever like the original. So that's the other common thing with these, is that it loses the blue caps on the side. The other thing that's lost on these things is the cable for the keyboard. The cable for the keyboard is pretty unique. Now you can make one out of a DB25 connector, but the cable clips on underneath, and I'll let you see here. So that's what it looks like. And then the other side has a DB25 plug that plugs into the keyboard. So either this gets cracked over time, or it's just plain missing. And the last one I seen go for on eBay, just the cable alone, because, you know, people that collect these things want them to be original as much as possible, went for well over $100 just for the cable. And then the other thing that goes wrong with these things typically is the little tabs here will snap off. The same with the keyboard. They'll snap off because they're so thin. It's just like a little latch. I don't know if you can really see this on the camera, but it's a little latch. So what happens is when you're lugging this thing around, the keyboard basically, there's a little channel on the bottom that slips in, and then the keyboard locks with these little tabs. This is spring loaded, so it locks the little tabs on the top. So the tabs tend to break off, both on the keyboard and on the top of these cases. So that's the other thing that goes wrong. And lastly, you know, as far as common things that go wrong with these things, the membrane on the keyboard gets worn or dried up. I don't want to say dried up, but the membrane on the keyboard gets messed up, and so basically the key starts getting hard to. They don't get sticky; it's just that they get hard. You have to really bang on them, so they get very difficult to actually register. So that's the other thing that goes wrong with these things. So a myriad of things, but it's usually always the same suspects, you know. Some of it is superficial, so that's obvious, but we're going to get to the internals. So this is your normal. I've seen this happen. In fact, I bought one of these at a newfound friend, but I bought one of these recently, and the gentleman selling the unit was showing me that the unit worked. So we plugged it in, and we turned it on. And as soon as we turned it on, yes, the C64 screen came up, and then it started wiggling, and then it went blank, just like this, just like you're gonna see here. And it turned out, you know, I bought the unit because I just already knew, just looking at it, what happened. The PLA was bad, but I saw the PLA chip get burned right in front of my eyes. So that was crazy. So this is what I mean, blank screen. It's not that the screen is completely black. So the disk drive starts whirring, the light goes off, that's normal. And then the screen will turn on once it warms up, and then you'll see nothing. So that is your typical PLA issue right off the bat. Sometimes it's, you know, the SID chip that's gone bad as well, but 9 times out of 10, I have already found, like I said, I have at least half a dozen of these, and the few that have had this problem have been the PLA chip. And I've learned how to just knock that chip out really, you know, quick without having to take out boards and stuff like that. So that's what I'm going to show you here next, okay? So let's go ahead and shut this puppy off. And we'll disconnect the keyboard here. Put the keyboard aside. Okay, I'm going to take this handle. There's little tabs here on the side that lock and unlock the handle. So moving it towards the middle unlocks the handle. Okay. And I turn it to the side on purpose because here on the side, there's a couple of screws on the back and on the front that we're going to take out, okay? And if the handle ever gets really loose, kind of sucks, only because if the handle ever gets really loose, you're going to have to pop these things out. You can do it with a very small, thin screwdriver, but then you're going to have to put double-face tape back on them or glue them. I tend to glue, the double-face tape kind of still sticks to both because you're peeling it off, but I tend to just put regular white glue because white glue is easy to pop out later and heat up and take out and clean if you need to. So that's how I usually do that. But anyways, handle on this is fine. It's not that loose, so it'll survive. So let's get to taking this thing apart and let me show you how to replace this PLA chip. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is take out these 2 screws on the back on each side, and you'll see why. A second here. And I may have misstated earlier, there's also 2 screws in the front, but you don't need to take those 2 screws out. The basic thing is that you're taking these 2 screws in the back to slide this little side piece out. Okay? And be careful sliding this out. You want it to come outside, so don't force it, because this piece is really thin. You can see it's easily prone to bending and cracking, and you can see why. There's just, you know, a lot of channels here, and it makes the base really, really thin. So be very careful with this. Okay, I'm going to do the other side as well, the same. Okay, so now that we've got the channels out, there are 3 screws here on the side that you need to take out on both sides. And you only need to take the top 3 off on each side. You don't need to worry about the bottom 3 because you're not taking off the bottom of the case. You're only taking off the top of the case. Okay. Then there's 2 screws here on the back on each side that hold the cover on, the top cover. Okay, so now we're ready to slide this cover off. Just put it aside. So now there's the inside. Get this a little closer. There's the inside of the computer. Now might be a good time to clean anything that you see that's dirty. Like the speaker here is a little dirty, so we'll clean that up a little bit. But the PLA chip is on the side board here, right here. And it's socketed. That's the beauty of it. Okay, so I don't know how well you can see here. Let me shine a light on here. See, that makes it better. So there are 3 ROM chips here at the bottom. One of them in the middle, you have to be careful. You do need to replace them because the one in the middle doesn't use all the pins on the socket. Then there's the SID chip that's on the top. Let me see if I can get this thing in here just a little bit better. Okay, there's a SID chip that's on the top, and then the PLA is sitting on the bottom, and it's socketed. So our goal here is to take out that PLA chip that's there and test it. So we have a backbit tester that we'll use to test the chip instead of just putting it into another computer. But if you don't have a tester like I do, take that PLA and put it into a known working computer, swap it out, and then you'll be able to tell if the PLA is good or bad. So that's what we're going to attack now, is taking that PLA chip out without taking out the boards, because, I mean, a little bit more. There we go. Because otherwise you'd have to take this board out. In order to take this board out, there's 3 clips here on the top, in the middle, and the bottom, that basically you'd have to take the screw out and pop the clip out, take this board out in order to slide this out. It's just a pain in the ass. So anyways, here's how I do it. It's worked for me on the 3 or 4 I've already done. So let me show you what I do here. So I basically use these tools here to kind of just pry the PLA chip out from each side and pop it out. And then popping the new one in is just sliding it over the socket, making sure it's straight, and then pushing it back in. So let me go ahead and do that here real quick. Okay, so there you go. Pop the PLA chip out. MOS chips. These had 2 different chips in them. This is the most common, the 906.11.4-01. And these things just kind of deteriorate over time. So let's see if that's the culprit here. Okay, so I have my back bit tester. And we're going to test the 906.11.4 chip. Okay, I already have the jumpers on here ready to go. And let's keep our fingers crossed that it's just a PLA chip, because that'd be an easy fix. Failed. So we know this PLA chip is bad. Just try it one more time. Sure enough. So let's pop another PLA chip in there and keep our fingers crossed. Okay, so now rather than me replacing it with another 906.114 chip, those are just prone to die, especially if you use them a lot. So I'm opting to put in one of these Phillips chips. It's just a little bit more sturdy, if you will. So let's just make sure that this chip is good. Okay, so that chip is good. And I usually do this on the C64s. Haven't really tried it on the SX-64s, but like I said, those 906.114 chips just really don't have a huge lifespan. So, okay, so the pin 1 is at the top, so make sure the notch is facing the top here. Okay, and that's how you're going to put it in and slide it in. Okay. I'm going to set this down here real quick. This way. It's a lot easier for me to do it this way. Okay, so you want to make sure the pins are all lined up with the socket. That's important. And then you can push down. Okay, so that's seated. So let's keep our fingers crossed before we put everything back together. Okay, you don't need the keyboard hooked up to test it. And also, before we put it back together, just so you know, I'm going to go ahead and clean it. There's a lot of dust in here. So I'll take a soft brush, soft paintbrush, and clean it up. All right, moment of truth. There you go. Isn't that pretty? So that is the PLA. So let's just go and just test the SID as well. Let me get a test cartridge on here, since we have it open, and make sure that everything works. Okay, so here we have a diagnostic cartridge. Let's slide that in there and turn this guy on. So there we go, working like a champ. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean this up. I'm going to go ahead and put it back together. You saw how I took it apart, and so putting it back together is just the reverse. The keyboard, yeah, I can go ahead and test the keyboard. If there's anything wrong with the keyboard and I have to take that thing apart, I'll make another video of it. But if everything works, I don't want to waste time just plugging the keyboard in and testing all the keys. So I think at this point, basically, we're ready to put this thing back together again. And then I'll just do a wrap up real quick after we're done here. So easy fix. PLA chips, you could probably get away with one of the GAL modern substitutes that are made as well. I believe those work fine with the SX-64. Don't hold me to that, but that's what I believe. Obviously, I replaced the 906-114 with a more robust Philips chip, which I like those chips a lot better if I'm going to have something close to, that time frame. So, all right, so I'll be back. Let me put this thing back together. Call it a day. Easy fix. Love those. All right, so here we are. Let's go ahead and kind of wrap this thing up. So I just want to make clear something. I used the Diag cartridge, as a test, and you probably saw a bunch of stuff that said failed, or bad, I should say. There's a reason for that. That's normal. I'm using a Diag cartridge, but I don't have the harness for it hooked up to this thing. So because I don't have the harness hooked up, there are some chips that are going to look as bad because I don't have, for example, the keyboard harness hooked up, or I don't have the joystick port harnesses hooked up. So you're going to see some bad chips in here, and usually it's U18 and U1 along with the keyboard. And I'll show you as soon as this thing pops up. There's like 3 interfaces along the top right that are going to show up as bad. That is normal. My main thing here is to test the RAM, the ROM, and the SID especially. But see, sorry, there you go. U1 is bad, U2 is bad, U18 is bad. The control ports, because I don't have anything hooked into the ports. So it's normal for those things to come out bad when you're using the Diag cartridge without the harness. I don't really need to test it with the harness. I already know everything looks fine. So the only thing I'm going to do at this point basically is let's just test the disk drive. Okay. So I already have a disk in here. So first thing we're going to do is, oh, this is nice. These keys actually don't stick. And just so you know, if you find that some of your keys don't work, specifically the end keys, like the ones on the end, double check your plug, that the plug is in all the way. I've had occasions where the plug wasn't in all the way and it impacted usually the end keys. So I guess the signaling on the cable on each side of the plug impacts those keys. So double check, always double check if your keys, some of your keys just don't function at all. Just double check the cable. If the keys kind of awkwardly function, that's not the cable. Usually it's because the keyboard's dirty. Okay? So we're going to load something off this diskette. Keep your fingers crossed, because I'm doing this for the first time with you. Oh, awesome. Okay. So looks like the drive is fine. I can list the directory on there. So yeah. So I think this is good to go. I'll probably clean the keyboard because there's a tab here that I'm going to have to take the keyboard apart in order to replace the little tab. This is what locks. It's spring loaded. It's what locks. It has a little lip that goes up, and then underneath each of these here, there's a little recess underneath them. These also break off, and these are a pain in the ass to fix because they're part of the front, chassis. So these are easier to fix, these tabs, because you can just take the keyboard apart and replace a tab. I usually 3D resin print my own tabs. So when you have the keyboard apart, that's a great time to clean the keyboard and the membrane. So anyways, bottom line, this thing works. Stoked. We replaced the PLA. Hope you got something out of this thing. I'm stoked. Got another SX-64 for my collection. And, let's end this. So it's the same thing I always say, man. You only live once, so enjoy life. See you on the rebound.